You are listening to another edition of Block Report Radio with the Minister of Information, J.R. Today, our guest is Gerald Pereira, who is a writer and someone who has lived in Libya and traveled extensively throughout the country. We're going to be talking about the newest U.S. war front, that one being opened up in Africa and Libya. Gerald, since the last time I've talked to you, Obama has authorized the U.S. military to drop bombs on Libya. What is your viewpoint of Obama authorizing this? Some people say it was an illegal authorization. But what is your viewpoints first on the fact that President Obama, the first black president in the United States, dropped bombs on Libya?
Yes, I think this is sad because, to be honest with you, JR, I think deep down, President Obama is a very decent human being. But I think that his policy towards Africa and his policy toward Libya has been hijacked or is being influenced by the neocons, And I think that he's just, I don't think that he's really I think there are more powerful forces behind this. If anybody understands the nature of the system in the United States, I think this is crystal clear that I think the president has become a prisoner of very powerful forces that people, an invisible government, and who are not elected by the people, and regardless of whether Democrats or Republicans are in, these are the people who shape foreign policy. And I think the president, again, I said it, I think he's a very decent person, but I think he's, I'm not into the bashing of President Obama. I know there's a lot of contradictions here, but there's very powerful forces, and I think the neocons are behind this.
Well, what do you think about Sarkozy, the president of France, calling really loudly for this campaign, which was led by the United States and France and other Western powers? But what do you think about Sarkozy being as vocal as he has when he had a relationship with the Gaddafi family and also the Libyan people?
First of all, I think that the relationship that Sarkozy and France had with Libya is just one of convenience. I mean, it was all about oil and France's strategic interests, because France is interested, in taking Libya and those countries from the upper part of Africa out and put it into what is called a Mediterranean bloc, right? What they're hustling here to do is to redivide the carve up Africa, to break up the integrity. They don't want a Pan-African project. They want to break Africa up. And there are people, this is true, there are people in parts of North Africa, parts of Northern Africa, and in the Arab world who is committed to this. So, I mean, Sarkozy relationship, people like Sarkozy always wanted Gaddafi to go. They always wanted to destroy that revolution. But I think they were coming from. They realized at the end of the day they had to deal with Gaddafi because Gaddafi has support at home. And that, you cannot compare Gaddafi to some other regimes in the area. So they had to do business with them, and, Libyan oil is important.
Well, what do you think about the relationship that they said that Libya, or is it not true, that they said that Libya actually contributed to the campaign of Sarkozy and also the president of Italy?
Yep.
Is that true? As well as I know they dump a lot of money into the economy of England by way of a lot of Libyan students going to study abroad. And, of course, the regime in Libya pays for their education.
Well, I'm not, I've heard statements statements made by Saif Islam Gaddafi and a few others. But this is what I do know. I think it was, if I remember, I think Marx once said that capitalists will tend for the rope to execute their mother. I think, all those people are interested in is everything is about money, everything is about economics, it's about oil and business. And when it comes, they can, they're not principled. These are not principled people. And I think, Gaddafi and the Libyan revolution understand these facets, these features of these people's mindset. I mean, for example, when Libya paid compensation for the Lockerbie bombing, they said we paid it. We took the thing, but we didn't commit the crime.
Right.
So they had to pay. They paid money to get the sanctions lifted, and they did that.
So it's like international extortion is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. JR, I want to say something. There are two things I want to make very important here to your audience out there. It's interesting that Lebanon is one of the Arab countries who led the charge for this no-fly zone, right? This so-called no-fly zone, right?
Right.
Lebanon tabled the motion, put it there, right? And it's interesting, Lebanon is a member of the Arab League, and Qatar, right, is one of the countries who have recognized the rebels. Let me tell you this. You know, they hate Lebanon, these two countries that you see in the charge, Lebanon and Qatar, and there are a few others, but let's deal with these two. See, they hate Gaddafi. They hate him. Why? You know, 2 years ago at an Arab, I think it's 2 years ago roughly, at the African Arab Summit, right? He was the only leader who came out Arab, leading that part of the world, and made an apology for the Arab rule in this trade in captured Africans, right? Mm-hmm. He said the way that the Africans were kidnapped and treated. He said, and up to today, we have rich Arab elites and countries who are still practicing this thing against Africans, treating them in a very barbaric manner and condescending manner, right? And they hate that because Lebanon is a country, look, I think it was only 6 days ago, they had to charter 2 aircraft to take more than 600 maids from domestic workers from Madagascar back, right? There will be one black maid every week is being killed. There is no laws against discrimination there. That can't happen in Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. You see? And in Qatar, the Qataris, all of these Gulf Arabs, they're racist. They treat the Somalis, the darks, and the Sudanese and everything like trash. So when Gaddafi gets up and chastises them for their racism, right, they don't like it. They don't like it. So they're happy to see him go. They're not part of any, they want nothing to do with Africa. They're happy to go with this so-called Mediterranean bloc. And this is the reaction. So if Gaddafi is hated among them, that's an honor. He doesn't want to be in the company, you know, of these people who masquerade, call themselves Islam, or what they practice is far from Islam. They tell you, but the Ummah is one and we're all Muslims and all that garbage. But yet when you go to the Kaaba and all that, black people and people of the discriminated against, they hate that. They hate that. So they hate Gaddafi for that, because Gaddafi stand up and expose these hypocrites for what they are. So they're happy to see him go.
Can you speak a little bit about the African countries that voted also for this quote-unquote no-fly zone, or what we should call it what it is, this war on Libya?
Yes.
Gabon, Nigeria, and South Africa.
Yep, and South Africa. Well, before we get to South Africa, Gabon, the president of Gabon, his father, Omar Bongo, was very close to that's a neo-colonial regime. This is a man, the president of Gabon, Ali Bongo. He actually rigged an election. He rigged an election, right? Got so much, the opposition came out against it, but the French and the Western powers said nothing because he's a facilitator of imperialism. You know, that is why he's one that facilitates it. The Nigerian ruling elite, they're another neo-colonial regime, right? So they will facilitate imperialist penetration and breakup of the Union. South Africa, the ANC, there's a lot of contradictions in the ANC, right? And as a Pan-Africanist, from years ago, we know that there's nothing Pan-African about the ANC. The ANC has never had a Pan-African vision. The Pan-African vision was from the PAC and AZAPO and the BCM founded by Steve Biko and so. So what you find today now in South Africa is you might got Jacob Zuma standing there as the president and influencing, but within a lot of the people who were once supporters of apartheid, they're now in the ANC. Many of them are in the ANC. And there's a big row in the ANC right now over the position that was taken in voting for this so-called no-fly zone. You know, so, you know, it's a shame. It's a shame. And countries like, you know, I expected countries like Gabon and Nigeria, but not South Africa. This is a country that when they called, the man Gaddafi answered. You know, Libya and Cuba contributed to that struggle tremendously to abolish apartheid. Many fighters from the ANC, AZAPO, they were financed, educated, trained in Libya, sent to Mozambique and so to fight the apartheid regime. And I'm really appalled that Jacob Zuma's government can support that. Yes. These are some of our problems and contradictions that we have to deal with. You know, one great black scholar said, you know, in Africa what we have is leaders in Africa, but we don't have African leaders. It's a different thing.
For those of you who are just tuning in, we are talking to Gerald Pereira, a journalist, as well as someone who has lived and worked extensively throughout the Libyan country. Gerald, can you talk a little bit about the activity or inactivity of the African Union? How has the African Union responded to the president of the African Union's country being bombed?
Yep. Well, brother, I just want to say this. I just got I've been reading a statement issued by the People's Empowerment Movement of Barbados, the Pan-African movement, and they're calling right now for all the governments in the Caribbean, different places to stand up, right? And they're calling on the African Union to be more proactive, to get out there and to get the hostilities, imperialist aggression against Libya to be stopped. And they're calling on the African Union. Now, some of the African Union countries, I think, led by Uganda, I think Senegal, I think a few others are getting together, but I don't know what's happening. I haven't heard anything more. But they need to, I think this, they need to come out openly and take a solid stand. It's interesting that this so-called international conference that is going on in London, we're seeing at the table, I've seen only the Europeans and these racists that you have in the Arab states too, who are there. And some movements who should be ashamed to refer to themselves as Islamic movements, But I think the African Union should have, the African Union needs to really get its act together and take a very solid stand here against an African country and against a Pan-African leader that is being, it's lined up against among the awesome power of this new bunch of crusaders. JR, one of the things I'd like to say to you is, our respected elder who departed and is now with the ancestors, Kwame Ture always used to remind us. He said, the imperialists don't lie sometimes. They lie all the time. There, I was watching TV and I'm watching this bare-faced liar, David Cameron, saying that they're in there to protect Libyan citizens. It's interesting. When the rebels are heavily armed and they're shelling the revolutionary forces, right? But nobody speaks about the rebels killing people.
Right.
Nobody. The rebels are advancing, they're shooting, they're capturing people, but they're not killing anyone. But the revolutionary forces are killing. When the revolutionary forces retaliate and they're fighting to defend themselves, they're killing citizens, they're killing civilians. It's interesting. And we're listening to this nonsense. This is an armed rebellion. These people were given weapons. The first time when the uprising, the rebellion started and the security forces went in, there were people snipers were shooting at the security forces. This is an armed rebellion, and there's concrete evidence that Al-Qaeda is in there, right? The other thing I want to mention, one of the Al-Qaeda commanders in there, right, who is now, it's all over the net, you can read it. This is a man who was captured in Afghanistan, okay? He's Libyan, and he was handed over to the Libyan government by the Americans. He was later freed by Gaddafi's regime. Now, if Muammar Gaddafi was such a tyrant or a murderer, why did he allow this man to go free? In fact, they started releasing members of the LIFG, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, about 3 years ago, long before all of this thing is happening. They were releasing them and putting them back, trying to rehabilitate them and bring them back in the community. So why are they saying if this man was such a vicious man, these people would have died a long time? Could you imagine, with all respect, I don't want to get into this, if a captured Iraqi was handed back to Saddam Hussein at the time, he would not have been alive to be fighting again. So I'm trying to show you this man that they're trying to portray as some tyrant, right?
Right.
He is not. He is not. This is a man who, people who know this man know that this man is a man who basically, if you read his green book, you'll see it. This is a man who over the years has stood for peace, right? There are many conflicts. Look, the other day, there was I think 2 years ago, there was a huge Tuareg rebellion against the governments of Mali and Niger, And the talks were held, the broker talks in Libya, in the city of Sirte, and it came to, they agreed on a number of issues and so. Now, the Tuaregs are saying that they're going to defend him. In the words of one Tuareg lieutenant, he said, we were forgotten by everybody, right? But Gaddafi helped us. When we were sick, when our children were ill, he sent aircraft to lift us for medical treatment and carry us back. So he said, we are here to fight for him. It's interesting that when Africans go to Libya to fight for Pan-African leader, they're deemed mercenaries, right? But the West can go in, and France now is talking about arming these Islamist terrorists. That's what they are. They're Islamist terrorists. These people who are waging this battle against Gaddafi are masquerading under the banner of Islam. These people are terrorists who would kill not just Muslims, but would kill Christians. And we as Pan-Africanists, and who come out, we know that in our tradition, all the prophets were black, all the prophets were Africans. So we don't make distinction among our people as black people, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, or whether the original Hebrews. We're not talking about the Zionists and things. So we know this. So we are not into any pan-Islamic project. I'm not no pan-Islamic or pan-Islamist or any nonsense. I'm opposed to that. I'm a Pan-Africanist, and I believe that we have to bring all of our people, African black people, together under one banner, whether we're Muslims, whether we're Christians, or whether we are Hebrews, the black Hebrews. They're a bunch of neo-feudalists who will like to set up, their objective is an Islamic Arab Emirate, and they're waving those French flags and the U.S. flags to fool the American and the public and the world. But if they are able to roll back this revolution and seize power, it's going to be a different thing. You're going to see what is going to play out. And it's going to be worse than Iraq.
Can you talk a little bit about the red, black, and green flag that is being flown by the rebels?
The red, black, and green with the crescent. The crescent is on it. That's the flag the flag during the Senussi period. That's the monarch, the flag of the monarchists. Those flags, as somebody asked the question, where were those flags? Were they under beds or in cupboards for the past 40 years? Those flags were manufactured and brought in, right? And there are other forces behind that. Those flags is just like when they had the uprising in Lebanon, you saw all those thousands of Lebanese flags that were made in another part of the world and flown in. It's the same thing playing out here. It's the same thing. And while the battle for Libya is going on, they're trying to push out a progressive Pan-Africanist, a man who's resisting neo-colonialism in Côte d'Ivoire.
Speak to that a little bit for people that don't know.
Yeah, well, Laurent Gbagbo is, as you know, a very brilliant man. He's a fine mind, a historian, a man who understands the issues. What happened is, they had these elections, and the authorities, the responsible authorities in Côte d'Ivoire said they put a thing on it, a hold in it, because they said that Laurent Gbagbo is still the president because there was huge irregularities and padding of ballot boxes. For example, as was pointed out by one of Laurent Gbagbo's representatives, in the area where the rebels are, right, the amount of votes coming from that area, the amount of people who voted or turned up was more than the people that they have living in the area. So a lot of people, Gbagbo's supporters, couldn't even go to the polls because they were intimidated by the rebels, right?
Right.
So the court said, look, hold this. But they're not interested in that. External forces don't want to see. They don't want to rerun. They don't want to examine anything. They just want to put in their boy, their puppet, who will help facilitate the plunder of the resources, make the cheaper cocoa, cheaper coffee, whatever. And there's evidence that France was training and arming those rebels in a neighboring country. And they're trying to portray Laurent Gbagbo. This is what they do to progressive and revolutionary African leaders. Gbagbo has no assets in France or anyway. This is a man that I wonder why the youth, the young people, the young patriots, why the youth and the poor are ready to die for him. So this is going to be another drawn-out struggle. What we're witnessing here in Africa now, the battle lines are, being drawn. We're heading up for conflict. The leaders and forces that are committed to the Pan-African project, to the African Unity Project, we're witnessing they're coming under fire by the imperialists and the facilitators in the continent. And we have to stand with them. It's interesting that we should go over now to Haiti, where they allow Papa Doc's son, baby Doc, to return. But when Aristide, who commands popular support at the grassroots level, was ready to leave, why would the Americans call on Zuma to tell Zuma they were worried about him going back?
Right.
These are glaring, this is hypocrisy to the highest. Baby Doc looted his country. Jean-Bertrand Aristide was extremely popular, still is popular, and if the whole of free and fair elections tomorrow will sweep the polls. This is a man that refused to allow the IMF and the World Bank to dictate to him. If France is so much interested in democracy and human dignity, why the hell France is still taking reparations? The descendants of slaves got to pay the French for their ancestors who enslaved our people.
Right.
Haiti won its independence. And Haiti has to be, instead of they giving us reparations, Haiti has to be repaying France, because our ancestors smashed the entire system of slavery, establishing an independent republic.
And many believe that Aristide was overthrown because he demanded that France give that money back.
That's right. He was removed at gunpoint and put on a plane by some of the very forces who are bombing the hell out of Libya today. The United States, Canada, France, and all of them. They were involved in moving Aristide out of that country. And this is France that is standing now but they're going to protect the Libyan people. What hypocrisy. Such bare-faced liars they are. And it's time our people wake up to this nonsense.
For those that are just tuning in, we are talking to Gerald Pereira, a journalist who has lived extensively and worked extensively inside of the country of Libya. Gerald, we're running out of time.
Yes, bro.
Can you give us your last comments? We're going to come and get at you, during this conflict. Hopefully the conflict will be over soon. But can you give us, what are your last remarks? What do you think that we should be remembering about Libya or this conflict?
I would like to say this, bro. My brother, I let the world know. I think there's a number of articles that people should check online. There's an excellent piece came out, an open letter to Muammar Gaddafi, the Colonel Gaddafi. It's on the web. Written, it's a beautiful piece for everyone to read. And I want people to know that the way they're trying to portray this man, it's a campaign of disinformation and lies. And what is important as Pan-Africanists and as progressive people and revolutionary forces all over is that we should call in our collective voices to get this imperialist, this campaign that is being waged against Libya fit to come to a halt.
You were just listening to the voice of Gerald Pereira, who is a journalist who has lived and worked extensively in the country of Libya. I am the Minister of Information, JR, for BlockReportRadio.com. And until next time, we out.